Hi, I'm Susanna Kenton, and Untapped is my first podcast. And whenever you do something for the first time, you kind of look to the audience to see how you're going. And so I had a little feedback the other day on Facebook. I had a comment from a gentleman I wanted to share with you that said, F off, Susanna. No one wants to hear about an 80-year-old man's sex life. So what that let me know is the subject of this podcast is something that is triggering, and I don't think there's any harm in that. What I've noticed is that ageism is rampant in our society, and I happen to have a friend who's in his 80s who loves life, who is enjoying a wonderful sex life. And during this time of lockdowns and restrictions, I've looked around me for inspiration to see the people that are living well. And I wanted to share Carlos's story. In fact, I initially encouraged him to write a book, but then I thought about it and thought at the age of 80, who wants to write a book? I've written a few during my time, and it can be a pretty grueling process. So we decided, because we were separated by COVID restrictions, he's in America, I'm in New Zealand, and he's not able for the time being to get back to New Zealand, that we would have a conversation and turn it into a podcast. So this is how Untapped was born. And I'm looking forward to sharing a few excerpts of it. And your reaction to it may be just like my friend who told me to F off, or you may find some value in it. For me, it's really not so much about sex. It's more about savoring life, finding ways to enjoy what's good about life, even in times that are challenging. And let me share a few extracts with you. One of the things that I've noticed you are an expert at is prioritizing play and fun. And one of the examples that I would give is at the age of 79, you went out and bought a couple of electric scooters.
Yeah, yeah.
What possessed you?
Total disregard for my personal safety, obviously. I did fall off of one of the scooters into a flower bed, but fortunately I wasn't injured, and I'm reconsidering whether to reconnect with the scooters. Yeah.
You had a girlfriend who I believe was older than you.
Yes, she was 10 years older than I am. I was intimate with her for about 8 years or 9, and she was 89 the last time I was with her. And she commented that I made her jump.
In a good way.
In a good way. Even as we get older, our parts haven't moved. They might have aged a little bit, and they may not work as well as they do, but they're still there, and the sensitivity is still there.
How is it that you're not prey to the same kind of ageism that everyone else? Look, I was in a relationship with a man for a number of years who was younger than me. And the reason that he gave for leaving was that I looked old.
That appearance thing just hasn't been a big issue, because my friend that was in her late 80s was still beautiful to me.
That's lovely.
And the other thing that I'm discovering would be the attitudinal difference that you have when you get beyond about 70. It's been really one of the finest decades of my life.
So the difference between sex now and sex back in the 60s, 70s, 80s?
Well, we were pretty primitive back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And but we got the job done, but only because of the natural instinct, where now it's become sort of a science. It's changed. There's no question. I discovered the joy of sharing with the person the emotional aspect as well as the physical aspect. It made the experience deeper and more meaningful, and it makes you happier in the long run. We've talked about older people and sex and how much it can add to your life. And one thing that I'd like to have you consider would be to find an 80-year-old or 75-year-old woman, have her listen to my conversation, and then interview her. And she can say, that guy is completely off his nut, or he had some good points, or, wow, I'm determined to go out and find a lover at this point.
Well, let's put the word out there right here that we're looking for. How old does she have to be to qualify?
I'd say over 70.
Over 70, okay.
Yeah, over 70. Yes.
a woman
Yeah.
listening to this podcast who is over 70 and up to 120. We're not going to be.
Yeah. No, my experience stops at 90 so far, so I don't.
So don't be ageist, Carlos.
Yeah,
Don't be limited in your
yeah.
thinking. What's your vision of what might be fun to do when you come back?
I don't know. Spend time with you, I guess, and it might even include that lunch in Sydney.
And are you
And
flirting with me when you say that? Is that
yes, I am. Of course, I am.
Thanks for listening to Untapped.